My wife said, "You're sleeping in the guest room until you apologize." I just said, "All right." 3 weeks later, she walked in and found my side of the closet empty and divorce papers on the desk. The argument that ended my marriage wasn't a big, explosive fight. It was a quiet, stupid disagreement over a piece of furniture. A ridiculously expensive, ugly armchair that my wife Jenna had bought without consulting me. It was delivered on a Tuesday. A monstrous thing upholstered in a fabric that looked like a sick parrot. It clashed with everything in our living room, a room I had meticulously designed and furnished myself. I own a small firm that restores and sells mid-century modern furniture. My home is my showroom, my sanctuary. Every piece in it is something I've personally sourced, restored, or built with my own hands. That chair was an insult to everything I do. When I got home from my workshop and saw it squatting in the corner of our living room, I just stopped and stared. "What is that?" I asked. Jenna walked in from the kitchen, a triumphant smile on her face. "It's the new armchair. Isn't it fabulous? I saw it in a magazine and just had to have it." "It's hideous, Jenna," I said, maybe a little too bluntly, "and it doesn't go with anything in this room. Where did you even get it?" Her smile vanished, replaced by that familiar, tight-lipped expression of indignation. "It's a designer piece. It cost $4,000, and I don't appreciate you insulting my taste in my own home." "Our home," I corrected her, "and the $4,000 came out of our joint account, which I am the sole contributor to, in case you'd forgotten." That was it. The fuse was lit. She launched into her usual tirade. How I was a controlling, unsupportive husband. How I didn't appreciate her efforts to make our house a home. How my obsession with my old, dusty furniture was suffocating her. It was the same script she'd been using for years. A script designed to make me feel guilty and eventually give in, just to have some peace. But this time, I didn't give in. I stood my ground. I told her the chair was a monstrosity and that it was going back. The argument escalated, a pointless, circular battle of wills that ended with her delivering an ultimatum, her voice shaking with rage. "Fine," she hissed. "If you hate my taste so much, if you can't even support one single decision I make for this house, then you don't have to share a room with me. You're sleeping in the guest room until you apologize, and until you learn to appreciate me." She stood there, arms crossed, expecting me to back down, to plead, to start the familiar cycle of apology and appeasement. But something inside me, something that had been worn down and eroded by years of these little power plays, just went quiet. I looked at her, at the ugly chair, at the beautiful room she had just violated with her careless entitlement, and I felt nothing but a profound sense of exhaustion. I just nodded. "All right," I said. The simple, quiet agreement seemed to throw her off more than any argument would have. She stared at me, waiting for the rest. But there was nothing else. I walked past her, went to our bedroom, and gathered my pillows and a blanket. I walked to the guest room at the other end of the house and closed the door. She thought she was punishing me. She thought she was putting me in a timeout, like a naughty child. She had no idea she hadn't just banished me to another room. She had given me the space, the silence, and the clarity I needed to finally leave the prison our marriage had become. Update 1. The first few days of my exile were, to be honest, blissful. The guest room was sparse, but it was quiet. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without the constant, low-grade anxiety of having her next to me. I woke up each morning, went to my workshop, and came home to my own quiet corner of the house. We were two ghosts haunting the same space, communicating only through the bare minimum of polite, icy necessities. Jenna, for her part, seemed to be enjoying her victory. She was acting like a triumphant queen, magnanimously allowing me to continue living under her roof as long as I followed the rules of my punishment. She would have her friends over, and I could hear their loud, cackling laughter from the other end of the house. I knew they were talking about me, about my childishness, about how Jenna had finally put her foot down. She was waiting for me to break, to come crawling back with an apology and a promise to love her hideous new chair. She was so confident in her power over me, so certain of my eventual submission, that she didn't notice what was really happening. I wasn't stewing in resentment. I was planning. The guest room became my command center. I started my exit strategy, not with a lawyer, but with a quiet, methodical untangling of our lives. The first thread I pulled was financial. For our entire 10-year marriage, I had been the sole earner. Jenna hadn't worked a day since we were married. It was a choice we had made together, or so I thought. I had been happy to provide for her, to give her the comfortable, easy life she wanted. But that arrangement was built on a foundation of love and respect, a foundation that had clearly crumbled. I opened a new set of bank accounts at a different bank. I had my company's accounting department reroute my salary. I started moving my personal savings, assets I had from before our marriage, into these new firewalled accounts. I also hired a forensic accountant, a discreet professional who began a deep dive into our joint finances. I had a suspicion that Jenna's spending was far more reckless than I knew, and I needed a full accounting of the damage before I made my next move. The second thread was logistical. I started looking for a new place to live. Not an apartment, but a house. A place with a large workshop, a place that was entirely mine, a place where no one could tell me what furniture I was allowed to have. I spent my lunch breaks and evenings scrolling through real estate listings, making quiet calls to agents, and scheduling secret viewings. The third, and most critical, thread was personal. I started reconnecting with my own life, a life I had let atrophy over years of trying to appease Jenna. I called my brother, who I hadn't seen in months because Jenna found his wife annoying. I had dinner with old college friends, the ones Jenna had dismissed as boring. I started spending more time at my workshop in the evenings, not just working, but rediscovering my passion for my craft, a passion Jenna had always treated as a messy, inconvenient hobby. For 3 weeks, I lived this double life. In the house, I was the quiet, chastened husband, sleeping in the guest room, eating my meals alone, politely coexisting with the woman who thought she was punishing me. Outside the house, I was a man systematically building a new future, a future that did not include her. The turning point came at the end of the 3rd week. The forensic accountant sent me his final report. It was worse than I had imagined. Jenna hadn't just been buying expensive furniture. She had been bleeding us dry. There were thousands of dollars in credit card debt I knew nothing about, on cards she had opened in her name, but which were being paid from our joint account. There were regular, substantial payments to her sister, a woman who was supposedly a successful artist but who was, in reality, being subsidized by my income. But the worst was a series of large, unexplained cash withdrawals over the past year, totaling over $50,000. The accountant had no idea where the cash had gone, but I had a suspicion. Her ex-boyfriend, a charismatic deadbeat named Ryan, had recently resurfaced on social media, bragging about a new sports car and a trip to South America. That report was the final piece of the puzzle. My quiet, methodical exit strategy was no longer enough. This wasn't just a matter of disrespect anymore. This was a matter of profound, long-term financial betrayal. It was time to accelerate the demolition. Update 2. The day I found the perfect house was the day I knew there was no turning back. It was an old, beautifully maintained mid-century modern on a few acres of land just outside the city, with a massive detached workshop that was bigger than my entire current house. I made an offer that day, a cash offer, using the funds I had already secured in my new accounts. With a new home secured and the accountant's report in hand, I was ready to pull the final threads. I spent the next few days in a whirlwind of quiet, focused activity. I arranged for movers, not to my old house, but to my workshop, where I had already started moving some of my smaller, more personal pieces of furniture. I went through our house, room by room, with a small roll of blue painter's tape. Every piece of furniture, every lamp, every rug that I had bought, built, or restored with my own hands, I marked with a small blue X. By the time I was done, the house looked like a crime scene. The living room, the dining room, my office, they were all covered in blue X's. The only things left unmarked were the contents of her closet, the kitchen supplies, and that one, monstrously ugly parrot green armchair. The day before the movers were scheduled to arrive, I took the final step. I sat down at the desk in the guest room, the same desk where I had planned my escape, and I filled out the divorce papers my lawyer had prepared. I cited irreconcilable differences and attached a summary of the forensic accountant's report as an exhibit. The next morning, I was up before dawn. The moving truck arrived at 7 a.m. I had instructed them to be as quiet as possible. For 2 hours, my crew of hand-picked trusted movers systematically emptied the house of every item marked with a blue X. My entire life, my entire history was packed into that truck. The last thing to be moved was the contents of my side of the master bedroom closet. I went into the room we had once shared. Jenna was still asleep, a peaceful, oblivious look on her face. I quietly gathered my clothes, my shoes, my personal effects, leaving my side of the closet and my drawers completely bare. Before I left, I placed 2 things on the polished surface of the antique desk in the corner of the room, a desk I had spent a month restoring. The first was the set of keys to the house. The second was the stack of divorce papers, with the accountant's report placed neatly on top. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I got in my car and followed the moving truck to my new life, leaving her to wake up in a home that had been surgically hollowed out, a museum of her own bad choices. The first call came at 9:17 a.m. She must have finally woken up and realized what had happened. I let it go to voicemail. The message was a frantic, confused plea. "Michael? Where are you? Where is all our furniture? What is going on?" The second call came a few minutes later, after she had undoubtedly found the papers on the desk. This one was not confused. It was pure, unfiltered rage. She screamed, she cried, she threatened. She called me every name in the book. I listened to the message with a strange sense of detachment, then deleted it. Then came the calls from her family, that from her friends. I ignored them all. I had made my statement. There was nothing left to say. Final update. The 3 weeks she had banished me to the guest room were the most productive of my life. The year that has followed has been the most peaceful. The divorce was, as expected, a nasty, brutal affair. But it was a battle I was completely prepared for. Jenna, faced with the undeniable evidence of her financial infidelity, tried to pivot. Her lawyer argued for massive alimony, claiming she had been a devoted homemaker who had sacrificed her own career for mine. My lawyer countered with the forensic accountant's report, which painted a very different picture. It showed a woman who had treated our marriage not as a partnership, but as a personal slush fund. The $50,000 in cash withdrawals became the centerpiece of the legal battle. She refused to say where the money had gone, claiming it was for personal expenses. But my lawyer, armed with the information I had given him about her ex-boyfriend, subpoenaed his travel records and bank statements. The timeline matched perfectly. The day after each large cash withdrawal, her ex had made a significant purchase: a down payment on a car, a first-class flight to Brazil, a deposit on a luxury apartment. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was incredibly compelling. In the end, the judge was not impressed with Jenna's case. She was awarded a small, temporary alimony for 1 year, an amount that was just enough to cover the basics, a far cry from the lifetime of leisure she had expected. She was also held responsible for all of the secret credit card debt she had accumulated. The house, which was in my name, was mine to keep, but I didn't want it. It was tainted. I sold it and used the proceeds to invest in my new workshop. The last I heard, Jenna is living in a small rented apartment with her sister. Her parents, who were horrified by the revelations of her financial deceit, have reportedly cut her off. She had to get a job, a real one, as an administrative assistant at a law firm. She is living a life she never planned for, a life where her choices have real, tangible consequences. A few months ago, I was at a high-end furniture auction, bidding on a rare Eames chair. I was with my new partner, a woman named Sarah, who is an art curator and who shares my passion for beautiful, well-made things. As I was examining the piece, I looked up and saw her, Jenna. She was there with a man, an older, wealthy-looking man who was ignoring her, his attention focused on the auctioneer. She was wearing a dress I didn't recognize, and she had a hard, desperate look in her eyes. She was playing the same game, just with a different player. She saw me. She saw me with Sarah, laughing and happy. She saw me looking at a piece of furniture with a genuine, passionate interest. She saw the life she had once had, the life she had disdained and taken for granted. She just stared for a moment, her face a mask of bitter regret, and then she turned and walked away. The funny thing is, I do have her to thank for one thing. Those 3 weeks in the guest room were a gift. She thought she was punishing me, But she was just giving me a head start on my new life, and I have never looked back.